Welcome back to The Joy of Vinyl. I'm Rick Coste. A few months ago, I posted this video. Now, in the video, I talked about tone controls and a little bit about, my thoughts around tone controls. Should they be used, or are they somehow bad for the listening experience? At the time, I compared it to walking into, say, a museum with color-tinted glasses. At the time, I preferred not to use tone controls because I didn't want the signal path to be, affected. I also loved the discussion that the video generated, and really the various opinions about them. As I've upgraded my system, a funny thing happened. My opinion has softened when it comes to tone control. So, why would a few system upgrades soften my opinion about the use of tone controls? Well, this is where it got strange, at least for me. When I began my audiophile journey decades ago, I used tone controls to adjust for bad sound or entry-level equipment. I didn't really, think twice about boosting the bass or flipping the treble up a bit. As I got older and cared more about the integrity of the sound, I really began to shy away from tone controls. I wanted an all-analog signal that wasn't colored by a tone control. With every purchase, I felt I was getting closer and closer to the perfect signal for me and my budget. And that included a customized turntable, an all-tube signal path from the phono stage to the speaker, and I upgraded my speakers as well. And this is where I began to notice something. That clean signal was as close to the sound on the record as I think I was going to get. And in some cases, that sound wasn't very good. It wasn't the equipment's fault. And it took me some time to realize that. Some records sounded, amazing, almost impossibly good, while others were, the best way I can say, they were a bit harsh on the ears. They were brighter than I remembered. And there was less bass on some of those records. Now, what had happened is my journey to as clean a signal as possible led me to a sound that revealed the flaws in some of my records. In most cases, it was the pressing or maybe the way that the records were mastered at a particular point in time and a place. Like, a good example is Cheap Trick's Dream Police. It's a very bright sounding record in places, and that's the way it was mastered. It's meant to be that way. My ears, at least as I've aged, don't love that as much. I love the music, but not the brightness, at least not when played back on my system. Black Sabbath's Sabotage is the opposite. It really shakes the room, as does the Interrupters' debut album. Monkey Island, another example by the Jay Giles Band, that straddles the line with songs that are top heavy with the treble and others that land in the middle. Now, these are all things I didn't notice until I upgraded my equipment. And that includes, the stylus I use, the bronze, Ortofon bronze. It all revealed the nuances in the sound. Now, as a test, I activated the tone controls in my amp to soften the treble on the brighter sounding records, and I began to take notes on which recordings I felt required it and which ones didn't. If a record didn't require it, I bypassed the controls again, or the tone controls again. But was I really getting closer to the actual recorded music by doing this or by doing so? If I shut the controls off, what was I left with? Sure, it gives me a signal path that's unaffected by the bass and treble knobs, but it's affected by many other things. When you think about all of this, it's affected by my use of tubes. It's affected by the cartridge and stylus, the quality of the tone arms, affected by the wiring, as well as my choice of speakers. I swap any of these things out, and that sound will change. It has to, right? If a different piece of equipment didn't change the sound, what would be the point? Some amps control the bass better, as do some speakers. My Galleon TS120 has great bass response. And the mid-range may sound fuller as well, depending on the equipment. And this is all affected by the tone without adding actual knobs into the mix. And here's another thing. My speakers, they have an attenuator knob in the back to account for different sized rooms. If a room is more, say, reflective, smaller and reflective, you can set it to low to help attenuate the highs. Now, that's essentially a tone knob by a different name. And I have it set to low for just that reason. The capacitors in my amp also affect the tone, as do the tubes that I select. I love to swap tubes out and swap them out for a different set of tubes, and that tone's going to change. And that's another form of tone control. The type of speaker also does this. The KLH Model 5s do not have a bass port. They are completely enclosed. So this affects the sound as well. Move them closer to the wall and it enhances their bass response. Again, that's all controlling the tone. So do you see where I'm going with all of this? I might consciously select to bypass tone controls on my amplifier, but I'm using a different form of tone control every time I move my speakers, every time I say roll my tubes, or every time I swap out my cartridge for a new one. Not only does the sound stage change, but the frequencies in that stage are affected. By focusing on my speakers, by moving them or changing that attenuator setting, I'm changing the tone. So why am I so dead set against enabling my tone controls if they enhance my enjoyment or bring me closer to the sound I want from certain records? I don't like accentuated treble. Like I said, the older I get, the harder it gets on my hearing. It's fatigue. It causes that listening fatigue you hear about. And it's not my system, it's certain records. So why not use my amp's treble knob to reduce it? It's a mindset thing, really. I have myself convinced, or did, that tone controls move me away from the sound that the artist intended. But, how do I know what they intended? In most cases, the artist does their thing and they leave it to the mixing engineers and the producer to, enhance or manipulate the sound. Some engineers go for more depth and some for more power. Now, that power might come in the form of a recording mixed to, say, enhance the treble or even the bass. It's what they like. What they like might not be what I like. When the Jay Giles Band, left the recording studio after recording the album Monkey Island that I mentioned, they left it in the hands of a different engineer than the one who handled, say, their records Showtime or The Morning After. Each album has different levels of bass, treble, and a mid-range presence. When I encounter a mix that's high in treble, I do have it in my power to change that. I can either move my speakers every time, or I can change tubes, or I can simply, turn the treble down. And really, what's wrong with that? So the bottom line really is here, don't let anyone tell you how you should enjoy your music. Seeking advice is fine. I mean, God knows, I do it all the time from the great community here, from all of you folks. My opinions change, and that's part of the journey. If they didn't, well, there really wouldn't be much of a journey, at least not one worth making a video series about. So I now turn it to you. What do you think about all of this? Have, say, your opinions changed about tone controls over, the years or during your journey? I'd love to hear from you. You can comment, below, and if you enjoyed this channel, click subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching. And until next time, please take care of yourself and enjoy your records.